morning. We're so glad you could be with us here today on Maryfield's Gardening Advisor. Happy Easter, joyous Passover, and happy, happy spring. I'm actually borrowing that from my friend Karen, who put that on her Facebook page, but I thought that sounded so good.
And it definitely does.
It definitely does. And we've got a great weekend ahead. At least today is supposed to be really pretty. So it's a great day for gardening. So we've got some great ideas for you to get you inspired. We've got a wonderful guest, and I'm going to let you do the honors.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, indeed, we do have a wonderful guest. This gentleman has been with us a number of times before, and we're very, very lucky to have him come and then share his, not just his expertise, but his enthusiasm.
Or expertise.
Yes. So we have David Culp with us, and he is a wonderful horticulturist and an author, so he'll tell you about this too. Okay, David. Give us a gleaning of what we're going to do today.
Well, this is my new baby, the layered garden. I've actually got a little car seat to take it around in. It is about basically how much pleasure you can wring out of one spot. And make a four-season garden, but it's more than succession planting. It's about relationships of one plant to the other and the garden to the larger outside world. Trying to keep in mind that our gardens perform only by what we ask out of them and what we demand out of them.
And you demand a lot.
I demand year-round interest.
There you go. And well, you should.
And it produces.
Yes,
you can do it
really
too. And that's
right. And that's one of that's our topic of the day, is to talk about that small space, what you can wring out of it, as you say. Yes.
And while we've got David here, we're going to take full advantage of him. So I'm sorry, we're not going to be taking phone calls. We're going to be talking about the layered garden throughout the entire show. But before we get started, just wanted to give you a hint of what's happening at Maryfield Garden Center this weekend. First of all, we were so happy that everybody came out to our spring gardening celebration last week. That was wonderful. So it was a great kickoff to spring. Here's some more kickoffs to spring. Today at our Maryfield location, Karen Rexroad is going to be talking about an introduction to ground covers and vines at 10 a.m. That's at the Maryfield Community Hall, which is right next to our Maryfield location. Got something really special, of course, at our Fair Oaks location going on today, right, Peg?
That's right. We will have David Culp. He and I will be leaving here very quickly to be at the Fair Oaks location at 10 o'clock, and he will have an opportunity to talk to you in greater detail about this layered garden and the plants that are in it. But he will also be there to sign his wonderful new book, and I've read it from cover to cover. It's worth it, believe me.
Great. Take advantage of that. And at our Gainesville location today, Robert Woodman, who you've seen on the show several times as well, is going to be talking about native plants. So great topics. That's at 10 a.m. at the Gainesville location, 6895 Wellington Road in Prince William. So please take advantage of those today. Next week, they will continue. We've got a little change next weekend. You'll see it says April 6th and 7th. So instead of just on Saturdays, next weekend on Saturday, we will have container gardening and then fragrant gardens at our Fair Oaks and Maryfield locations. Excuse me, our Fair Oaks and Gainesville locations. And then we start our Sunday series at our Gainesville location. So that's going to be using edibles and containers. So we're going to change it up a little bit. Yeah. Wonderful topic still. We go through the end of April with our seminars. You can go, as you see on the bottom there, maryfieldgardencenter.com. You can get the entire schedule. So great opportunities. And just one other quick announcement. Tomorrow is Easter, so we're going to change our hours a little bit at Maryfield Garden Center. We're going to close at 5, so all of us can go to our family dinners and enjoy each other. And so we will be open till 5, so stop by if you need to pick up a beautiful Easter lily or some potted bulbs or beautiful color. You can do that on your way to your dinner.
It does look very cheerful out there.
Doesn't it?
Ooh, I love
nice
it. We're
to
also
see the colors of spring.
also ready for the color, absolutely. Yep. And a lot of what David is going to be talking to you about today is the use of color. But color through the seasons, and there's even color in the winter time. Yes, there is. So a little more about this.
The winter, well, the winter time is especially when we're starved for color.
Right.
And any little bit kind of helps you know that all is not lost, for sure. It doesn't take a lot, but there is a lot if we just think about it. There's a lot of choices that we have regarding plants. and it just actually builds into a crescendo in late spring, early summer. And it's just knowing these plant choices to put into our gardens to have this year-round interest. And I hope to be able to share that with you today at the segment here this morning and at the Fair Oaks location. If you have questions, I'd encourage you to come out and you can play Stump the Chump with me and we can answer your questions for you.
That's great.
Well, and there's a great deal to be gleaned from that because, as I said, this is a wonderful book that has incredible pictures too, and David and I will be going out into
our virtual garden.
Our virtual garden. As
Speaking of the book,
you know.
I understand Diane brought this to my attention. I didn't realize this, but this book has been named by Barnes & Noble as one of the best books of 2012.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes,
That's
it has.
amazing.
Absolutely.
And we're celebrating, hooray, hooray, it's going into its second printing the 1st of April, and that happened in 4 months, so I'm kind of proud of the book and the baby.
And he needs to be proud of it because books are wonderful. I mean, it's great that we have the TV show, that we have the seminars. There are so many different ways to learn, but it's rare that you get a book that is so incredibly well written. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't talk down to you. He's done it hands-on, and that's very important. And it is for sun, oops. Sun and shade. Okay, I'll hold it there this time if you want to try that again. For sun and shade.
Sun and shade, difficult spots, like growing under black walnuts, coping with deer, using bulbs. I wrote this like I was having a conversation with you, Peg,
Right.
with a fellow
Which we
gardener,
have
you out
many
there.
times.
It's like we're having, I tried to write it in a conversational tone.
Great.
And he did.
Okay.
So
Well,
we'll share that with
As
you.
Peggy mentioned, when we come back, they're going to be going to our virtual garden to show you some pictures, kind of let you know how to get started with a beautiful garden in 4 seasons. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about the layered garden today with our guest David Culp. So he and Peggy have, I've sent them into the wilds of our virtual garden, as we like to call it. So let's take a look where they're at.
Yes, we are in the virtual garden, and we have a bigger-than-life flower behind us here, which happens to be a favorite of both of us, you know. And David hybridizes. Guess what? Helleborus, and the deer don't eat it.
Well, I like hellebores, and I'm probably forever linked with that particular species, and that's okay with me because it worked for Van Gogh with sunflowers, so hellebores with Dave Culp is all right too. I like their spirit, Peg.
Right.
You know, anything that blooms with snow on the ground and can withstand the frost, moxie, verve, backbone. It's a plant with all of the above. Starts blooming in February, goes to June. The deer don't eat it, has few diseases or pests, really more than a handful of reasons to fall in love with it. And the color choices then on top of that are limitless. There's so many possibilities for people like you who like to make color combinations and play with colors in the garden. Hellebores are great. For example, the pink frost, the flower itself, and then you have the euphorbia, the green bracts right there.
Beautiful.
Echoing the nectaries up into the center of the hellebore. So you can play color combinations games with 1 plant, 2 plants, or a multitude of combinations. And the fact is, you can enjoy them for Easter Sunday. It might frost between now and the beginning of spring, but this is going to take it. You won't have to worry about it getting frosted on, because both of these plants will take a light frost. If you move them out of containers, you can put them in the open garden once you're done with them, and the plant can do double duty. I especially like this new group of hellebores, the Artigudifolius niger crosses. This is called Pink Frost, because they're more out-facing, and I think this particular group works very well in containers. And usually when they're done, I take them out of the containers and use them elsewhere in the garden.
I love the combination that you've selected here because they're both, number one, they're perennials. And they do have a great presentation at this time of year, and then both of them are beautifully evergreen. But let's run through some of these others. I'm going to step back and let you run with this.
Well,
David.
you know, we're in the book. I talk a lot about design and about how and why we make a garden. But I think the thing I like the best about the garden is watching something grow. Right now, seeing old friends emerge from the ground, like this peony seedling, that's what gets me started. Maybe it harkens back to when I was a little guy and read Jack and the Beanstalk, that sense of amazement, that sense of something fresh. That is what does it for me. In the next picture, you'll see the same plant and a few years later emerging from the ground. This is a peony. You think of it when it's in full flower, you know, that classic round shape, but even in the early spring, those shoots are beautiful with the red cast on it. So it's learning to look at a plant itself at different times of the year. As it emerges from the soil, the young stems, you can even make combinations with these emerging shoots by underplanting it with different violas, arabis, to enhance that color. And in the next picture, of course, the flower itself of the peony, you have 3 seasons of interest already in this plant. The emerging leaf, the emerging stems, and then in flower. I happen to like the singles a great deal because they withstand a lot of the summer rains, late spring rains. The singles are kind of a classic shape. And it is one of your most popular selling plants, I believe, Peggy, at Maryfield.
Absolutely, it is a very popular plant, and we all are looking for fragrance too. And there are so many of these. They're so incredibly fragrant. One of our floral designers was working with some that had come in from the florist. It's just the most heavenly fragrance.
Well, they also speak to me as my grandmother's garden. She was a great pianist because of the sense of nostalgia. And I also put this a different way, is that it's that sense of nostalgia, the pass-along plant, but it has an emotional layer to the garden as well. That's another layer that we have to think about in the garden.
Nostalgia. But I love the next one now because you can point to all of the beautiful things that are in bloom in this spring garden. We were talking about the 4 seasons, so tell them what all these things are.
It's the individual plants. Those are the paintbrush, you know, the paints, if you will, and then you put them together in combination. This is the garden, my garden, in late May. You see in the back border here, Salvia eveline. You see the digitalis. Blooming in the foreground. The Tradescantia Sweet Kate, that is the yellow plant in the foreground. I tend to plant very closely together. Bare earth kind of makes me nervous because there's a chance for a weed. So I really pack all the plants in there. It's repetition of color. Here we use a lot of purples, pinks, pastels, and then we bump it up a little bit with that yellow Tradescantia Sweet Kate in the foreground. At once someone said you couldn't use yellow and pink together. I thought to myself, well, what color does a pink rose have? Yellow stamen. So you can use them together, but it's a matter of degree. And you, as garden painters and garden artists, it's your job to manipulate these colors and to make a beautiful picture out of it.
Okay, now what happens to that same space?
Same space before we go away. Next picture. This is that same location.
There we go.
We had it in late May. This is that same spot the 1st of August. It's gotten to be about, well, I'm 6'2". The border itself is about 9 feet tall. It's 40 feet long, 15 feet wide, and it is a riot of color, which is good in the summer months because the sun is so hot and so overhead. You need a lot of color to kind of compete with the natural sunlight. And that's one reason why I use it.
I absolutely love this. Now this is a slight hill, isn't it?
I live on a hillside. The border itself is in a slight grade, but I raised it up, being 14 feet wide,
Right.
1 foot to the back, higher. So the plants are more at eye level. It's a little trick that I use to give drainage and to play with scale and heights of the plant. It puts them at eye level.
Now, talking 4 seasons here, you showed them really late spring, and this is late summer, early fall.
Yes.
But in the very beginning, don't you have bulbs in there also?
I have bulbs, snowdrops blooming now.
But in that same space.
In the same space.
And they're
Back
in between
before-
the perennials.
Back before the previous one, there was black and white tulips. Before that, there were 500 snowdrops. There's always something going on in that space.
But now those bulbs are in between these perennials,
Yes, they're-
and
yes,
they're
yes,
going to
yes, yes.
thrive.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got that early spring,
Yes.
and then you have the late spring we showed you, and then you have the late summer and fall.
And those are all layers. The layered
Layers
garden.
in the garden. Now, the other thing that I think we should say a little bit about here before we go is the fact that in many books that you read, you'll be told, put your tall things in the back, ta-da, put your medium-sized things in the middle, and put your low things here. Okay, you could do that. It's all right. But it's a lot more interesting if you put a few of the tall ones and intersperse a little
Absolutely.
bit. And then there are those plants that we call see-through plants, right? That you can put near the front of the border, which gives it a much greater dimension.
It's dramatic.
Yeah.
It's much more dramatic
Yes.
that way. And I don't, I'm personally not a big fan of the choir boy effect. I like it to be a little bit
A
more,
little
and look
Right.
naturalistic.
Which this is. Plus, look, here in this area, he's got the beautiful tropicals. So he's also included in all of these perennial borders, those beautiful tropicals. We will be giving more and sharing more information with you in just a moment. We need to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm certainly getting inspired for the color of the season with these beautiful pictures.
Absolutely, and you'll find all those lovely pictures in this book too. There's a lot of information, but there's a lot of inspiration with the pictures. And David, we're going to stay on a roll with you telling us about some of the plants that you have in there.
Well, it's
Garden.
spring, when a young man's fancy turns to the garden, okay, among other things, okay. And I believe it's all about the plants, okay, and gardens start with the plants themselves. It's the basis of our art form. So we got to get to know our medium first. I've tried to do a selection of several plants that might be useful for you to start with and to know about, maybe the plants less traveled, as it were.
I love this picture, of course, because it's very wooded and you're talking about shade.
This is 2/3 of my property is a wooded spot, and it is dry shade because it's unirrigated. This is a hydrangea hillside in June, and one of the things that I'm certainly glad about, that plants don't always read the books, these hydrangeas are doing very well in dry shade. As a matter of fact, the white blooming hydrangea in the background is one of our native quercifolias. It's seeding around, as is the blue one in the front, which is a serrata type. Living outside of Philadelphia, a little bit colder. The serratas are good in the years that we have a very cold winter, because if they die down to the ground, they will still come back up and bloom on new wood, on the serrata types, the lace cap serratas. So I use both of those for color on the hillside in the summertime. Then it goes basically to a texture area. Now this shade border is a kind of a border to extreme, because it's a 1 acre on a tilt dry shade border.
And it's perfectly beautiful. And here again, you go into those 4 seasons, starting with the bulbs, starting with your love. I'm sure there's galanthus in there.
There are as many galanthus on that hillside as there are clouds in the sky. It follows up with hellebores, then it goes into daffodils and narcissus, then it goes into rhododendron, more like Olga Mezit, PJM, because I found that these older varieties, because my soil pH is a little bit more alkaline, a lot of the complex hybrid rhodies don't like it, but the species ones and the old-fashioned ones do just fine, and they're good enough for me because they perform. Then it moves into textural color of other herbaceous and shrubby, woody plants, and then small flowering trees like Styrex japonica, going all the way into the color of the fall. Some plants that you may not know, the next image that we have is Acanthus spinosissima. Now that's a mouthful. Acanthus spinosus, probably if you need to know it, this actually gave rise to the Corinthian columns. The leaves, when they come out of the ground over a basket, gave that little curled effect to the capital of a column. They're very long with, they're Mediterranean. That should tell you that it's going to take a dry condition, poor soil, blooms in late June, 1st of July, about 4 feet tall. Very dramatic. Those light pink and that purple hood over the top of it is a very striking combination. Does not need staking, loves full hot baking sun, even part shade. Now, one thing you need to know about acanthus, if you love it, plant it and leave it, because if you try to move it and leave a little bit of the root, another acanthus will appear from just the smallest root. I use it where I want to stop the eye because it is a bulb plant. A mature planting can be 3 to 4 feet across. I either use it in mid-border or at the end of pathways where I want to make an accent point.
Is there a common name for that one?
Common name, acanthus. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
They call it bear's britches.
Bear's britches maybe, but the bear would be itching because they're prickly leaves.
Gotcha.
Okay? Can't understand that. The next image is a red hot pokers. And if you thought red hot pokers were only red, I beg the point with this image. They can be almost white to green to yellow. Again, these are native to North Africa, southern Mediterranean areas that have dry summers. Because I don't irrigate, I do work with a dry plant palette. These go about 4 feet tall, very long-lived. I'm sure you've seen it in old gardens with the red hot pokers blooming for centuries, it seems like, in some gardens. The next image is a small. This is about 6 inches tall. It is Corydalus chiancifolia. This blooms in the spring, but what all 3 of these previous images have in common is the fact that they're all verticals. And these vertical shapes, I think, are the most dramatic in the garden because they link the earth to the sky. They're standout plants. So I do use a lot of verticals in my combinations. Here's one 6 inches tall, the other 2 4 feet tall.
I think we have one more. There we go. I was going to say we had one more picture.
Well, you asked me what my favorite plants are. It's usually the last one that I saw. This is another favorite.
Sounds like Peggy.
This is another group of primulas. And this is a particular type of primula. It is an auricula. It's very highly stylized. Look at those little flowers. Looks like someone almost painted them on there. Now, these plants are perfectly hardy. They look like greenhouse plants, but the only thing they don't like is the summer heat. Neither do I. Okay? So put them in a cooler spot. I take the pots and sit them under a shade tree in the summer, and I forget about them.
And that's wonderful. I love
That's
those
right.
little plants. Yes.
Okay.
And it's fun to try something different every now and then. We wouldn't be where we are if we didn't do that, and David certainly wouldn't be.
That's the nature of the garden has changed.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right.
Yes.
Okay, we'll be right back, and we've got some more great plants to share with you. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Maryfield's Gardening Advisor and to our wonderful guest, David Cupp, who's talking to you about his own personal garden because he's put a lifetime into that garden. And he's telling you about some of the plants that are in it. Hey, this talk about combos, colors, whatever.
Here's everything in one plant. I teach shade perennials at Longwood. And one of the first things people ask me, either in class or even at a lecture, what do I do for dry shade? Okay, what can I plant under this maple tree? What can I plant under an evergreen? The first two plants that invariably come out of my mouth are Epimediums. This is Epimedium enchantress. It was given to me by my hellebore mentor, Elizabeth Strangman. And you see a combination all in one plant. You know, the maker has given us enough composites in this world, so having plants with a little different shape, I think, breaks it up and makes the garden a little bit more interesting. Now, it will take dry shade, even more so if you kind of watch it in extreme dry periods in the summer, the first year, to get it established. The emerging foliage here has that beautiful purple and green on those serrated edges. I spent a few hours on Thursday morning cutting off the old foliage from last winter so you could see this new foliage and the new flowers better. It doesn't distract. So I always cut them off right before the plant comes up. And the next picture is another Epimedium. It's called Orange Konigan, or Orange King. Epimediums come in a lot of different colors. They come in yellows, whites, purples, bicolors, but the color of the flower in contrast with the foliage gives me one more design note to play with this lovely orange. Think about underplanting that with some of the spring bulbs like Scilla or blue muscari. That blue and orange just pops in the garden. They're extremely long-lived. They take dry shade. They give you just about evergreen interest. They're evergreen up until the very coldest of winter, and some will brown out. And the next image we see another Epimedium. I believe we have Starlight. So would you see the little white with the purple with the yellow? It just, the name, it looks like little shooting stars, and a very narrow leaf. These plants give you different texture. We have a lot of fern-shaped plants in the shade garden, but this gives us a bold looking leaf in the garden, kind of leathery and long-lasting. The list goes on and on and on. We could almost have a whole morning just on Epimediums. There's a lot out there, but a great plant for dry shade. In our next image, we see a specific site. This was a barn ruin on my property. It was a carriage house with a roof off of it. I thought, what am I going to do with this space? Well, the answer was simple. I'm going to plant it. I'll plant the rock wall. I started putting campanulas in there. That happens to be Campanula portenschlagiana, which goes around a lot. It's not invasive, but it's vigorous. And I felt like the modern artist Pollock throwing buckets of paint up on the wall. So I had blue. But before this comes on, it is a yellow phase with that corydalus that I showed you in the previous segment. Then it goes to pink. There's a pink phase with the Saponaria osmoides, and now it's blue. I don't know if you can see on the color registration, but there's actually one down here in the troughs, 2, 3 different kinds and shades of campanula in this image. My thing about blue is that it goes with almost any colorway. It goes with the pastels, and it goes with the hot colors. So when in doubt, use the color blue. Had someone come and visit me once and said, Dave, if you take out one more rock from that wall to plant a plant in, it's going to fall down. Well, so far it's still standing. And I put in there, you'll see there's succulents, agaves, anything that likes it hot, baking, dry, and alkaline. It is certainly a difficult site, but it's a site that a lot of garden visitors really like.
I think it's one of my favorites among yours. And please do take note of the containers that he has here. He's a multitude of them, but fortunately, most of those don't require a lot of water either, do they?
No, only a few of the color pots, extreme, they don't. If you work with a dry plant palette, you see the agaves in the corner, you see the succulents, you see the acorus. Those are drier plants. If you make that your backbone, then you won't have to do a lot of watering.
Now, another interest is, we were talking earlier about the location of the tall plants and the medium plants and the short plants, and then mixing them up somewhat. Look what he's done here. He has the wall, but the plants below are also mixed.
It's about the different layers. I actually took a sledgehammer to the floor and made planting pockets in the floor of the space as well, to have different places to plant, to give different layers. That wall is about 9 feet tall. I think we have one more image.
We've got two more, and they're your favorite plants that don't talk too long.
How did we go so long without mentioning? Well, we did. We started out with hellebores. These are the Brandywine hybrids. I touched each of these plants once, 3 times, did the crosses, gathered the seed. These are all from my house called Brandywine Cottage. What I'm trying to do is give different colors to paint pictures with in the garden. You know my great love affair with hellebores. Because of the time of year, this certainly brings home the statement that I made earlier, the variety of colors and shapes. I feel like we're only limited by our imagination when it comes to making color combinations in the garden. I'm trying to bring them to you. Possibilities are limitless.
Absolutely, and you're one of the people that has helped make that so. But we have, it's people like David who bring us these new plants because of their enthusiasm. All right, 1 second on this and we gotta go.
Nothing says spring like a black hellebore. Okay, there's enough yellow in the garden, but this color with the yellows and the pastels pops things up a notch. It's a beautiful black, almost purpley black hellebore, one of my favorite plants in the garden. Just wanted to share it with you this morning.
As we were walking through my own garden last evening, I too have one that's similar to this, but the foliage is very dark too. It's amazing how you do see those. You'd think, okay, I'm not going to see that in the garden, but you do.
Because there's so much pastel elsewhere, that pops it up.
Perhaps so. Okay, David, hang on to that thought. We need to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Okay, David and Peg have come back from the virtual garden, and here we are on the set.
Absolutely, and I think David is going to share with you a few more of the standout plants in the garden. You know, there is a lot more in his garden than hellebores.
I tried to keep a list while I was writing the book. I stopped counting at, maybe I shouldn't tell you this, at about 3,000 plants. You know, it's what I like, and nothing better being surrounded by what I like. And unless I grow it, unless I know how it performs, then I really can't talk to people about it unless I'm intimate with how the plant grows. So it's my playground, workshop, and it's what I love.
Your joy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the garden classics. Dad's from Pennsylvania, Mom's from Tennessee, and the state flower of Tennessee happens to be an iris.
I didn't realize that either.
So there's another layer to that plant. But I do like iris. You know, we looked at peonies, we looked at iris, and there's garden classics. Yes, I have a lot of really weird and unusual plants, but the garden is strung together by a series of these classics holding the place in the garden. And iris undeniably has to be one of the most important, because we have iris reticulatas blooming now in the garden. I'm sure there's probably some for sale for Easter. You can buy them in the fall, the Danfordites that bloom before the reticulatas. This happens to be, this image is cristata, which is our native iris, our native crested iris, and it blooms in the woodlands. It's only about 8 inches tall. So an iris that gives you a vertical grass-like element with the added bonus of that beautiful blue bloom. It's a crested iris. Right on the fall, the leaf that turns over goes down, there is a crest on it, so it falls in the crested iris group. Will tolerate dry shade if happy. If your crested iris is not blooming, it probably needs to be divided. So by the time this is blooming, you've had iris by using the Danfordites and the reticulata 2 months already by the time the cristata blooms. You can extend that time by using the classic shown in the next image. This is a German bearded iris. This is called Iris Batik.
I love that color.
And it looks like a batik fabric. You can see the name. I love the color too. I underplant this with blue forget-me-nots. It just kind of to float above. It's so different from other flowers, that natural breaking in the leaves. And the German iris are taller, about 3 feet tall. So they're blooming in May. So we've gone from March to May with iris blooming in our garden. You can even move onward 1 more month with the Japanese iris insadas. So by picking different species within our different varieties within one plant family, you can extend your bloom time. You plant early blooming varieties and late. That's something very important when you're planting your garden, because it extends out that season of interest. You can do that with almost any plant by asking for, is it an early blooming or is it a late blooming variety?
I love these iris, and forgive my interruption, but I want you to share with them something that you shared with me some time ago. I think the iris family is, as he said, very extensive and can extend the color and the beauty and the interest in your garden. But when it comes to the bearded iris, with the rhizomes planted near the top of the ground, we do have an issue with iris borer, and you solved that issue so well. Tell them what you did to keep those borers from eating those rhizomes.
Well, I started growing iris when I lived in Georgia, and the key there is planting high. That doesn't mean having a martini. That means putting it out of the ground where the corm lays on top of the ground. Okay, that is very important. Just Peg said, you don't want to plant them too deep. On iris borer, I tend to use a lot of the old-fashioned varieties because they're more resistant to borer. And I just use good cultural conditions. About if they start getting streaking on the leaf, I pull it off and don't let it disfigure. If it gets really bad, I will fan the leaves halfway through the season.
And then it obviously has great success. So we've talked about the iris, David, but you have another love too that can sometimes be a challenge, but there are many roses out there now that are not quite as, well, I won't say challenging, except that the heat of the summer doesn't always
I just think they're
agree
getting a
with
resurgence. You know, there's newer varieties, and
they
the
are.
popularity is getting back. I love it.
The next image. When our lives are complex and so fraught with a lot of angst, I think a return to the classics is very good. When you're in the garden, you have moments like this, you forget about the rest of the world for a moment, and that's important. Roses, I grow 53 roses in the garden, in that one little half-acre sunny spot. And to me, disease resistance is key. There are too many roses in the world not to ask for disease-resistant varieties.
Right.
If they're going to be prone to black spot, then I usually have we'll pick another. Okay, but again, a garden classic that for years kind of people thought they couldn't use because of disease problems. It's time to rethink that. Thanks to a lot of the breeders like the Hassle-Free, the Knockout, those are all newer varieties that have good disease resistance. But again, much like the old-fashioned iris, the old-fashioned roses are very disease resistant too. They've been around for a long time for good reason. They're survivors.
Great. David, I know you have a couple more plants to show, but let's take a quick break and we'll take a look at those when we come back.
We'll talk about this one when we come
yeah, there's
back.
a teaser.
Ooh,
Isn't that?
orange and purple. Is that not gorgeous?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be right back.
In my book, anyway.
Well, it's hard to believe this hour is flying by. Our last segment here, we've got a lot more to share. So you've got a few more classics you want to talk about.
Yes, he does. And as we were going out, he showed that purple and orange. Boy, does that pop. It's just got to be among my favorites.
It's a favorite combination. I remember one particular day I was driving in the back roads and I saw a farmyard with orange daylilies and purple liatris, and it just knocked me dead. You can do this time and time again. That would be in the summer. If you like that color combination, why not try lion's paw, Leonotis lenuris, which is really an annual or a borderline tender perennial. For me in Philadelphia, it's definitely an annual. For those of you viewers further south than here in the district, you might be able to overwinter it. It blooms very late in the summer, in the autumn. But it's about 4 feet tall at maturity. And you can cut it back and keep it shorter in the front of the border. I think the plant in the background might be a gentian blue in the background there. So I like sharp contrast. I like a lot of high contrast value. You saw that in the garden of equal intensity. It makes the garden pop and is a little bit more vibrant, I think. And that's especially good to do in the fall because Mother Nature is working in a lot of vibrant contrast herself. So you can make your color combinations even brighter in the fall than you might do in the early spring in a softer kind of light. The next plant is a Shasta chrysanthemum, dendranthemum. They've been around for a long time, certainly fall in the category of a garden classic. And the daisies are having a big resurgence. I'm particularly fond of the Korean hybrids. The Korean hybrids are the most winter hardy and the most perennial of any of the chrysanthemums. They're single, they're taller than your ones you might buy at a supermarket, but they're also later blooming. Oftentimes at Thanksgiving, I've been able to pick some of these for Thanksgiving arrangements for the table. They're a little bit later blooming variety. The important thing to me is that they live for a long time. Willingness to live is an important consideration when it comes to a plant, okay? And I like these, and they're starting to have a lot of new breeding work, giving us a variety of different colors to play with again in the industry. The next image is a fall crocus. This is Crocus savatica, the saffron crocus, what they actually make the saffron out of. But I think this little segment shows the importance that everything is fair game. I showed a Leonotis, which is a tender plant. I showed a perennial, an old-fashioned daisy, or a bulb. When we're making our gardens, I think we pull from every resource or category that we can to make a combination. If a bronze fennel works for my perennial border, I don't hesitate to use it. Most people say, well, it belongs in the vegetable garden. That is an artificial category. Same thing with an artichoke. I will use the artichoke, that bold foliage and texture, in the perennial border if it suits. So whatever works, whether it be a bulb, an annual, a tropical, You saw in the virtual garden, the cannas, where I pulled out the foxgloves and put the cannas and the allocations in. Everything is fair game when it comes to making a garden.
Okay.
I think so too. And David's company that he works for has a line of plants that I love the name that you've chosen. And it's for those things that are tropicals and for the annuals that you tuck in as an emphasis, and it's bodacious temperennials.
Yes.
I like that.
I had a friend
I don't think I would like that word. Bodacious.
Bodacious.
in Atlanta. She said, make me a garden. I said, what kind would you like? And she says, honey, I don't care as long as it's bodacious.
And that's where that came from.
That's where it
Such fun. So it's this Four Seasons garden takes all of it,
We've got about 1 minute left. Any words of advice or
words of advice
magic
is that
tips?
it's your garden, okay?
Yeah.
Play with colors, don't be afraid of change, and to experiment. It's all about close observation, experimentation. Remember, gardening is supposed to be fun. Have fun with your garden. They won't come knocking at your door, the color police saying you did something wrong. It's up to you. And gardening is a process, not a product. If you could do it all at once, would you really want to? No. I don't think so. I think it's the process. I've been gardening at Brandywine Cottage for 22 years, and it's not done yet. I'm happy with that fact.
That's great.
It's one more combination that keeps me going.
Absolutely.
Well, we're so glad you could be here with us. And
Thank you.
As I said earlier, the two of them are going to bolt right out of here and head to our Fair Oaks location, where David is going to be giving a seminar, and he'll be signing this book after the seminar, so take advantage of that.